I'm Joe Hohenstein. I'm a private attorney in Philadelphia with Landau, Hess, Simon, and Choi. I'm of counsel with them. But I'm here at the request of the ACLU because I handled one of the recent airport entry cases, the Syrian family that was rejected the very day of the ban, who got on the plane when they were legal, and when they got off the plane they were told they were illegal. So I'm going to apologize because I'm leaving at 11:30 in order to go have lunch with them up in Allentown. So if I slip out, that's why. But that's me. I'm Joe Hohenstein, and from Philadelphia with private practice and the ACLU.
All right. So I'm gonna go through the general description of immigration in the United States. And the first thing to understand is you have about 4 different ways to become legal in the United States, and they are, and by legal, the colloquial term is green card. The legal term is lawful permanent residence. So a lawful permanent resident is legally an immigrant. Okay? All of the people who are not U.S. citizens fall into 2 other categories. You have other people who are legal, who are non-immigrants, who are people who came into the United States legally and have stayed in a valid status. And they're all people who are here on some temporary basis. Visitors, students are the most common. Guest workers of various types are also on that list. So you have a delineation between legal immigrants who are lawful permanent residents and legal non-immigrants who are people with a temporary stay that has been authorized. Another type of people who are legal non-citizens are refugees and asylees. Refugees and asylees all have the right to become lawful permanent residents 1 year after they get their status or make their entry. So most asylees and refugees are going to be, or are on the track to being, lawful permanent residents. Then you have an entire segment of people who never been in the immigration system or entered without inspection or are here completely illegally. Those people are what most folks would call illegals or undocumented. Now, there is a different way to become unlawful, is to come here legally and then overstay or stay past the time that you're permitted. So you have 2 segments of illegal people, people who cross the border completely illegally and have never had any legal status, and those that had it at one point and now don't have it anymore. So that's your class of non-U.S. citizens. And one thing to recognize is there is...
Wow. Have the one attached to your
that is a finicky microphone.
It is.
Do you still have your portable mic?
No, I actually have it.
Do you have it turned off?
Oh, there we go. Wow. And here I thought it was my hearing aids. Okay, so those are the classifications. And what you want to be able to do is when you get here in any way, shape, or form, if you've bought into the American dream, what you really want to become is a U.S. citizen. So lawful permanent residents are the only people who can then move on to become U.S. citizens. For most of those folks, they have to wait 5 years. Some people who receive their permanent residence through a family petition from a spouse who is a U.S. citizen, those people can get it in 3 years, okay? And so as you look at that process, the way to become a permanent resident happens either, like we just said, if you're a refugee or an asylee, happens 1 year after you come. It also happens for family members, and there's a whole list there are certain people who are outside of a whole counting category, and those people come right away. Those, kind of common sense, but those are spouses, minor children, and parents of people who are already U.S. citizens. And a U.S. citizen who's sponsoring a parent has to be over 21. So that's why, people who come have their kids, they're not getting any papers anytime soon directly through those kids. That's something to understand. But so you have family. You also have employment-based categories, and those are usually for people with higher degrees of education or higher degree of job skills. And one key with employment-based immigration is for people who are already here, you need to be still legal. In other words, all of those people who stayed longer than they were supposed to, and all of those people who have never had status, they're not getting any permanent residence through a job. Okay? That doesn't happen. The third category is there's a small group of people who are able, if they get in trouble and get put in front of an immigration judge, to get deported. Some forms of relief, and most notably something called cancellation of removal, will give people an opportunity to become a permanent resident. A cancellation of removal applicant has to have been here a minimum of 10 years, has to have been somebody who has good moral character, doesn't get arrested, and also has to have a family member who would suffer an exceptional and extremely unusual hardship. And I'm going to repeat that, and then you think of a common sense definition of exceptional and extremely unusual hardship. That's about where we lawyers are with it. We just know that it's like that. It's kind of like pornography, you know it when you see it. So that's, but there's some special things that happen. The last special form of relief that I'm going to discuss, because it does impact, I think, one of the other topics we're talking about, which is going to be the DACA, because it's also one of the things that are available to children, is if a child has come completely unaccompanied, or in Pennsylvania, if one of the two parents has abandoned the child completely, that child is eligible if they go through the state family court custody and dependency program with a properly phrased order that addresses that child's status as a non-U.S. citizen. Those types of family court orders can then become recognized under immigration law, and the child gets the right to become a permanent resident. It is disputed, we have not yet tested, whether a child who gets a permanent resident visa in that fashion, claiming abandonment by one parent, with the other parent remaining in the picture, it is clear that the abandoning parent has absolutely no right. We do not know yet whether the parent who might maintain custody or care or a relationship with the child might still have a right someday to a permanent resident visa or some sort of petition from that child. So those are the real broad brushstrokes of what makes people legal and what makes them not legal. And one of the things I think to keep in mind as we move forward in the debate about all of this is the last time there was a decent count of those people who are considered unlawful or illegal, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 or 12 million people. But does anybody know how long ago that was done? We talked about Hazleton being 7 years ago. That last count was in 2007, which was so 10 years ago. So it is very likely a different number now in some ways, and my guess is it's much higher. I've spoken about this actually with somebody from immigration who has that fraud detection, and he's convinced that it's almost double that. So when we are discussing that type of movement to deport that many people, almost all of whom have never committed a crime in their lives. That is something to keep in mind as well. So I think with that, we'll keep on moving on. We've got to keep going.
Thank you.
Renewals are being made. We received a few this week. I've not heard any stories about new applications being approved. I've actually got 2 clients who had, for other reasons, never filed, who we may now file for, and so we'll find out maybe in the next several months. The positive as well is the most recent executive orders from the president and the memorandum that are out that I'll talk about in a little bit, specifically kept in place the 2 DACA executive orders from Obama, the one from 2012 and the second one from 2014, which never actually got effective, which was supposed to help the parents of U.S. citizen children. So that one hasn't been rescinded or attacked, but it's also never been implemented. But that's coming from the most recent memoranda that I'll talk about in a little bit. But real quickly, this last piece that Troy was talking about with DACA, the most common call I've been getting in the last few weeks are DACA recipients worried about their parents. It really is. And so, but the consultation that we can do when we do it right is to have an encompassing consultation that covers everyone in the household. And at the very least, even for people who are completely unlawful and don't have options and need to remain in the shadows, we can at least provide instructions and guidance on how to live as safely as they can. I'm sitting here with the Mexican consul's guide on what to do if immigration knocks. So we can give them that kind of instruction, and as Troy says, any consultation with a lawyer is confidential. So and we can't advise people to break the law, but if someone is unlawful here, we can instruct them on how not to further break the law. And one thing to remember about this, and I mentioned this yesterday, and I'm going to throw out 3 words, and you put the word law after each one: military, criminal, and civil. Think of military law. We have a president who 2 days ago referred to the current immigration action as a military one. Criminal law, he's trying to paint all immigrants as criminals, and there is certainly an area in which criminal and immigration law intersect. But civil law, all of immigration, is at its most basic, and it may be a legal fiction in the end, but it is technically considered civil law. In other words, violating an immigration or not being in lawful immigration status is not a crime. So that's something I think for all of us to be keeping in mind, especially as we're having conversations.
One quick question. Executive order in 2015 for parents that was going to address DACA. Why was that never implemented?
It was never implemented because of a case called Texas versus the United States. And that was the one that last year ended up in a tie. And essentially, when it came around to implementing an expanded provision for the children, which is what that order did, and also protections for certain parents, at that point, certain states, not all of them, and again, the states' rights thing, we'll talk a little bit about that, states versus executive orders, because it's coming in the other direction right now as well. But that never got implemented because the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said no, and then the Supreme Court essentially deadlocked on it. And so that's never been effectively implemented. Okay, I'm going to give a 2-minute summary of the 4 main executive orders that are affecting immigration right now. One is a very general order that everybody heard about right at the very beginning, a hiring freeze, right? So remember the hiring freeze in the context of all of these other ones that are, seem to create big bugaboos. There is an issue if the government's not going to be hiring people in certain types of areas and certain facilities or certain types of departments, that is going to affect the ability the government has to actually do all of the things that Mr. Trump is saying he wants to do. That's the first one. The second one is what is people will call the travel ban, the Muslim travel ban. The word Muslim is not in it, but it is a Muslim travel ban. He ran on it. He had people like Rudy Giuliani say this was the way for us to make the Muslim travel ban a legal ban. So it is a religiously based ban. Okay, so that one has been taken back to the drawing board, and they're going to come back out with it. The case that I just handled, again, that I'm going to have to leave and go have lunch with my clients at, that the case that I worked on with the ACLU was one of several cases where people challenged the ban on a wide number of bases. First and foremost being the Establishment Clause of the Bill of Rights in the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Okay, we shall not establish any religion as the state religion, and that is one of the things that the travel ban violates. Other primary arguments were due process arguments, and whether people were given proper information. My clients that I'm going to go visit all had permanent resident visas that had come from a family-based petition that they had waited for 13 years for, and a full year and a half's worth of vetting with the Department of State. So it was pretty secure to bring them in, okay? They were legal when they got on the plane, they were illegal when they got off, supposedly. So there was a due process argument in a lot of these cases as well. And then the final piece is separation of powers, and the degree that we talk about separation between the different branches of the government, whether the legislature or the president has power over this, and the president is using a section of law that has been used in executive orders for a long time. And we went back, and the Congressional Research Service even went back and researched it all the way back to Reagan. And under 3 different previous Republican presidents and 2 Democratic presidents, all of the times that this section had been invoked for executive orders, except for one, which was President Reagan's high seas ban to stop the Marielitos in the early 1980s. All of the rest of the travel bans or uses of this power were specifically designed like surgical scalpels against very specifically and almost personally named bad actors from different governments that had persecuted and hurt their own people who had committed international crimes. So those were the targets. It had never, ever, ever been used against people from all of the people from an entire country. And President Trump was trying to use it against people from 7 entire countries. So that concept of separation of powers is one of the other primary forms of the challenges as well. And that's also where the states' rights come in, because just like Texas challenged Obama's right to implement DACA, so too did the state of Washington challenge Mr. Trump, and that is the case that has come up and gotten all the press in the news in the Ninth Circuit and now the Supreme Court. So that's the travel ban. Then there are 2 other internal enforcement memos that talk about how ICE is going to now be a much more robust, and they're going to come after everybody, where President Obama had been focusing on criminal issues. Now they're going after everybody, and they're going to try to do it. But again, remember, they may be ending up and limited with how they can hire new people, who's getting hired and how much money does it all cost. So there's a lot of the features of those internal memos that are definitely something that are great, and I think you're probably going to see a number of people because we're getting increases in detention, right? I just want to comment on something that really strikes me from both of the last 2 or 3 things that both my fellow panelists have said in your question. And again, I'm going to throw out two words: fear. It is almost palpable, right? Reach out, feel it. Okay, let it go. All right. Seriously, fear is part of the strategy. All right? And so fear separates, love unites. And I'm not talking about love in the romantic sense. You guys know what I mean when I say that. So let's keep those things in mind. And one of the things that brings people together and is discussing these things and doing so in a way that brings together a plan and action in order to respond to those worst case bugaboos and bogarts that are in the closet that are going to come out and get us.
Sure, one of the most important immigration cases, you just reminded me, you talk about love, was the case of United States versus John Lennon. Because all we need is love. And went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Here we go again.
Yeah, it does. They all do. And we'll get to the question in a second. But one thing that I want to comment on about this whole concept of planning, and our receptionist in my office had exactly the same fear that you had on her. Exactly. She called it. She came in and said, "My mom's on the phone. She's working at McDonald's. ICE is out front getting the guys who are cutting the lawn." Right? So, okay. But so again, have plans in place, and we've talked about it also with plans about what to do for your children if you're undocumented. What care plans do you have? So we're now trying to get, as immigration lawyers, our family law colleagues in. Is anybody here practicing family law? Okay, talk with Troy if you're local, okay, and start working with him, because there are going to be things that we need to begin to plan in terms of powers of attorney and assignments for guardianship or care plans for kids if parents get detained. But we need to do that at the same time that we're ready to fight all these other issues on the macro level and say, hell no, you can't take me away from my kids. And to fight for those bigger issues, to say that underlying plan is unjust and unfair. So those are the kinds of things that, it's going to take planning and a community wrapping around. And everything that I've seen from the outside looking in about Lancaster, you guys are a welcoming community. You're one of the most, if not the most, I saw Facebook ads. It might have been Church World Service, I think, put out the ad about Lancaster being the most immigrant-friendly county.